Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'd like to thank you for joining us for this week's webinar in our SDG Leadership Webinar Series, which began in response to our new work from home environment and has continued with some great programming. We're very pleased to have you join us today for this webinar in the series on UN PRME, on UN Prime, and management education for the SDGs. We're very pleased to have some incredible speakers with us today. Joining me is Dr. Mette Morsing, the head and new head of UN Prime, Dr. Sanjeev Khagram, Dean and Director General of the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University, and Dr. Donna Rapaccioli, whose name I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, is the Dean of Fordham University's Gabelli School of Business. Before we dig into today's content, I wanted to just take a few moments to introduce the work of the UN Global Compact for those of you that aren't as familiar, and in particular, what we're doing at this moment to respond to COVID-19. Because we are at a very unique moment in time. The UN Global Compact, as the UN's corporate sustainability initiative under the Secretary General's office, is calling on business leaders around the world to support companies and workers affected by this COVID-19 outbreak. In particular, the power of the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact can guide business leaders in responding to the crisis. As the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, the United Nations Global Compact is calling on business leaders everywhere to unite to support workers, communities, and companies affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. A coordinated international plan involving the business sector will be and is proving to be critical in efforts to support people and companies affected, to limit further disruption to the economy, and to facilitate business continuity for a swift recovery, which, as we all know, is going to be very important. For every decision maker, the 10 principles of the United Nations Global Compact can provide ideas and inspiration in these uncertain times. In the spirit of solidarity and international cooperation, the UN Global Compact encourages business leaders everywhere to use the 10 principles as their guide to responding to this crisis. In particular, the ways in which the UN Global Compact is supporting this work, we're focusing on 4 core elements. First is the UN Global Compact's COVID-19 Special Appeal, which was sent out by our CEO and Executive Director, Lisa Kingo, several weeks ago, appealing to all the companies of the UN Global Compact and beyond to really take note and take special consideration of their role in responding to the pandemic and supporting the United Nations in its response. Additionally, we are conducting weekly Academy sessions. So the UN Global Compact Academy is the e-learning resource of the UN Global Compact. And we have special sessions specifically focused on corporate responses to COVID-19, which, unique to the Academy, are open to all, not just to members of the Global Compact. This past Tuesday, we had a session on building back better, and the recent CEO-led UN-backed commitment to build back with climate in mind from COVID-19. It's the largest such commitment ever by the UN Global Compact. And we have a session coming up on Tuesday, which is going to be at 10 a.m. Central European time, so a little bit different, but with the head of the ICC and several others on the role of small businesses recovering from COVID-19, which, as we all recognize at this point, will be a particular challenge and quite important. We also are supporting the UN system's pandemic response, coordinating emergency private sector focal points network, and strengthening collaboration with local networks and UN country teams around the world. And lastly, we're curating third-party resources, highlighting partner articles, reports, and guidance, unique to the business community and the UN Global Compact's role in this pandemic response. And with that, I'll move on to the general content. The UN Global Compact, for those who are not familiar, is the UN's corporate sustainability initiative under the Secretary General. We were founded 20 years ago by then Secretary General Kofi Annan, proposing to the business community that we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles, which will give a human face to the global market. 20 years ago, at an early time in inflection point in globalization, recognizing that businesses have a unique role to play as transnational players in the global economy, and committing to the norms and values of the United Nations as embodied in the 10 principles of the Global Compact is an important step for companies, and particularly CEOs, to take in being responsible actors in the world. And as I mentioned, this was 20 years ago. So this year is not just the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, but also the 20th anniversary of the UN Global Compact. It's an interesting year to have these celebrations, of course. What was going to be the 20th anniversary Leaders Summit of the UN Global Compact, held in the General Assembly Hall and additionally at the Javits Center, will now be a virtual event. It will be the largest corporate sustainability event the UN has ever had in its history. It's very special. It will be 25 hours of continuous following the sun around the world content, starting with the Secretary General, including leaders of the relevant UN agencies, CEOs, and chairmen from leading companies. And it will occur on June 15th and 16th. It is free for members of the UN Global Compact. And in fact, it is free for any employee of members of the UN Global Compact. So for those of you that are members on this webinar, we encourage you to share the resource of the Leader Summit with your employees and colleagues, and that can be found on unglobalcompact.org. For those of you that are not currently signatories to the UN Global Compact, we have a very reasonable $99 charge to join that two-day event. The UN Global Compact is, as I mentioned, based on the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. These are based on the 4 Universal Declarations of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Declaration for Rights at Work, the Rio Declaration for the Environment, and the International Declaration Against Corruption. From these, the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact are embodied, and the Sustainable Development Goals, which came out in 2015, are further supported by the UN Global Compact and our signatory base. Now, when a company or an organization joins the UN Global Compact, you are committing to the ambition of the Sustainable Development Goals in addition to the 10 principles. We have over 10,000 businesses committed around the world, but we are business-led, but multi-stakeholders. And so we have over 3,000 non-business signatories around the world in over 160 countries. The 10 principles of the Global Compact and the SDGs serve as a framework for businesses to engage with the United Nations, with the norms and values, and to underpin the sustainability work of your organizations. They provide a foundation and an ambition. Private sector action in particular will be key to the success of each of these Sustainable Development Goals. Through responsible business operations, new business models, investment, innovation, and technology and collaboration, the world urgently needs new solutions, breakthrough technologies, and inspiring leadership to create the world we all want by the 2030 deadline. For companies in particular, successful implementation of the SDGs will strengthen the enabling environment for doing business and building markets around the world. Even the most principled and best managed companies are challenged to thrive in communities marked by instability, to find skilled labor where adequate education is lacking, or to withstand natural disasters stemming from climate change or global pandemics. The world, the United Nations, the UN Global Compact, we need to evolve from an entrepreneurial, fast-growing global initiative into a professional, mature global organization with business leadership at the front and center. And to recognize that leadership, we have a program called SDG Pioneers for our business members of the Global Compact. As our CEO and Executive Director, Lisa Kingo, has said, Leadership in the 2030 era requires change agents. Change agents don't sit around waiting for the future to happen. They create it. They don't choose the path of least resistance. They stay the course, also when they are ridiculed or fought. In the end, they win. They have the future on their side. For those of you that are business members of the Global Compact, or for those academics or non-businesses that partner with businesses, I ask you to nominate SDG pioneers for recognition by the UN Global Compact and Network USA. You can find details on our website, and specifically at this link, we are recognizing Network USA pioneers, and we'll be nominating for the global recognition at the global level. And with that, we'll move on to the specific content of today, UN Prime and Business Management Education for the SDGs. The flow of the rest of the content will start with UN Prime and Mette Morsing, our new head of Prime. We'll then have some remarks from Thunderbird and Fordham, and then we'll open up for discussion in a panel format. Of course, we'll be welcoming questions from the audience. You could see in your dashboard the question pane. Please send questions at any time during the webinar. For those that we could respond to in text, we'll do so at that moment, but we'll incorporate your questions into the larger discussion as that progresses. And with that, I'd like to welcome Mette Morsing from UN Prime. Mette, if you could activate your webcam, and then I'll deactivate mine. Mette, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
We can hear you, but can't see you.
No, I know. I don't know what's going on. It worked so very well before.
Yeah.
It's strange.
Well, we could start with just your audio and the slides, and hopefully we could resolve the video in time for the panel discussion. So I'll deactivate my webcam. Mette, I'll let you take it over with the slides. I'm on your first slide.
Yes, but we agree that I'm just pushing my name, and then it should work. Is that not correct? Yeah. Anyway.
Is correct. There should be a little video camera.
Yeah. Yes. There it is. Yeah. Yes.
Wonderful. We can see you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam, for inviting me to this wonderful webinar that you're hosting. I'm very, very pleased and honored to be part of this session here today, or this late afternoon in Copenhagen. Only 3 weeks ago, I was appointed as the new head of Prime, so I'm very, very new in my new position, and this is actually my first webinar in my new capacity here. So I'm thoroughly delighted of joining this conversation today. So I've been a professor before I joined Prime 3 weeks ago. I was a professor at Stockholm School of Economics, and before that, a professor of Copenhagen Business School. Both places, I've been leading research sustainability centers for quite a number of years, actually since 2002, where I founded the Research Center for Corporate Social Responsibility at Copenhagen Business School. And then later on, I joined Stockholm School of Economics and was the executive director of the MISOM Center for Sustainable Markets. I've also joined school boards and councils during my years in academia, and I think it's fair to say that I've sort of, been working on the sustainability and the corporate social responsibility agenda in the classrooms and taking it all the way into the boardrooms of schools over the many past years. So I'm thoroughly delighted to now be given the privilege to head Prime, and I just see so many opportunities. And of course, today I'm particularly happy to be joining this webinar, where we have a champion school and an advanced signatory of Prime also joining, that we will hear in a moment. So I think it's fair to say, let me just start by saying that, I believe strongly that business schools and universities are among the most influential institutions in contemporary society. As we teach, as we research, we set frameworks, analytical tools, mindsets, not least for thousands of students that we graduate.
Mette, your audio has cut out. I don't know if you could hear me. I don't know if you could hear us.
Use this very moment to rethink higher education and the purpose of higher education, and how we educate the young people, and also the little less young but little older people, our very executive, the very big amount of executive that we also have in the classrooms at our schools and our universities. What kind of skill box, what kind of toolbox, what kind of skill set, and what kind of analytical frameworks we would like actually these students to leave our universities with. Can I have the next slide, please? Adam, could you put on the next slide? Thank you very much. So yeah. Just very briefly, this is my thank you. This is my very brief sort of overview of what PRIME is actually about. So PRIME was founded in 2007 as an initiative of the UN Global Compact to create a global movement and thought leadership on responsible management education in the world. So it has always had a very close alignment with the UN Global Compact. And of course, I think that is hugely important, because in my own research, I've always worked very, very closely with business, and more recently also with policymakers. So it is in the, sort of say, it's in the bones of PRIME to have that strong collaboration with business and with Global Compact. So we have, from the very start, identified 6 principles that are all signatories of PRIME are asked to report in every second year. It's about purpose, it's about values, the methods, the research, the partnership and dialogue that we ask business schools and universities that have signed up to report on. And this is exactly like the 10 principles of the United Nations Global Compact. This is a framework. It is principle-based. It is not a you should do. It's not PRIME telling any school what they should do, but it is an invitation to reflect with faculty and with staff at the institutions. How do we actually engage in the purpose, values, method, research, partnership, and dialogue to create more responsible management at the school? So yes, I will just say that we are today little more than 800 signatories, working in about 95 countries. We work like the UN Global Compact. You have the local networks. PRIME, we have our chapters, regional chapters. So we've got 14 of those, and we've got 8 working groups that specifically focus on topical issues. It could be gender equality, could be anti-poverty, could be anti-corruption, and so on, climate change, of course. And then we have a champion program where we, on over a 2-year cycle, and this is where Fordham is currently involved, a champion program where scholars are engaging and discussing and exchanging knowledge about how they go about integrating responsible management into their curriculum and across the school. And I think it's particularly important. One of the agendas that we're discussing right now is also sort of the implementation of principles across the school into the different departments of schools and universities in general. So these are my first words. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Mette. Thank you very much for that. We're really pleased to be able to host you for your first public speaking engagement in your new role. So congratulations on the role, and thank you for joining us for that first speaking engagement. If you could turn off your video, and then we'll welcome Sanjeev, Dean Sanjeev Khagram. Thank you. Let me advance your slide. Dean Khagram, I'll let you take it from here for your introductory remarks.
All right. Thank you so much, Adam and Mette. Just with Mette, I'm such a big fan of yours, read so much of your work. I think we've met a few times, and it's just a great success for PRIME to have you as the next leader, and we look forward to supporting you in every way that we can. Adam, of course, thank you for your leadership of the UN Global Compact USA network. We at the Thunderbird School of Global Management, as you probably know and many people know, we're 74 years old. We were one of the original signatories of PRIME, and we continue to be completely committed to everything that the Compact advances in everything that we do. We are now part of, we are the #1 ranked school for our Masters in Management, and I'll come back to that in a second. But we are part of the Arizona State University Enterprise, which was just ranked #1 in SDG impact by the Times Higher Education in the United States and #5 overall in the world. And so when I speak about our commitment to PRIME, it is of course us as a school, the Thunderbird School of Global Management, as a global business leadership management school, but it is also the entire Arizona State University enterprise. And I guess the one thing I will just say on the personal front, as I always listen to Adam's wonderful sort of overview of the history and the purpose of the Compact for myself, I was at the World Economic Forum when Secretary General Anand, sort of did the original challenge to companies, out of which was born the Compact. John Ruggie and I were together at the Kennedy School of Government and the Harvard Business School after he had founded with Secretary General Anand the Compact. Have been involved with the Compact over the last 20 years, and it's a remarkable thing to see its growth and importance in the world, but also how the current pandemic only reinforces its critical import and centrality to bring business and global business to the forefront of shaping a new world order as we enter the 2020s and the SDG era. So with that, could I have the next slide, Adam, please? So for us, we focus at Thunderbird and Arizona State University across the board, from our undergraduate, actually below that, all the way down to our programs. We have a wonderful program called Thunderbird for Good, where we have been training women entrepreneurs at the bottom of the pyramid on advancing new businesses and social enterprises all around the world. We've trained 150,000 women and entrepreneurs in dozens and dozens and dozens of countries around the world. To our undergraduate programs, our Bachelor's of Global Management, Bachelor's of Science, International Trade, to our master's program, the Master's of Global Management, the one that's ranked #1, all the way to our executive programs. Throughout that, our mission is to empower and to train and to influence global leaders and leadership for the 4th Industrial Revolution, and to maximize the benefits of this 4th Industrial Revolution for the advancements of the SDGs and the principles of the Global Compact. It is embedded in our vision, in our strategy, in the programs, in everything that we do. So on the right-hand side, you can see in the new curriculum that we developed after I took over the Thunderbird School just 2 years ago, we have every student takes a sustainable business course. There are several different concentrations in sustainability, corporate social responsibility, new forms of partnerships, public-private partnerships, to advance the principles and the practices of the Global Compact, as well as the SDGs more broadly, and in our executive education offerings. I'm just showing you a new one that we're about to launch in a digital format. Of course, we're all accelerating and amplifying our digital offerings in today's COVID world, and we're just about to launch one on the circular economy and sustainability excellence. So in many ways, everything we do is at the intersection of the 4th Industrial Revolution and the Sustainable Development Goals, with a major focus on empowering and training and influencing the next generation of global leaders and managers to advance these critical goals and aspirations. If I could go to the next slide, Adam, please. So we are an institutional partner also to the Global Compact Network USA, working very closely with Adam and the team there. We are supporting the US Network USA through member newsletters, events, and engagements, operate many of the network programs, including launching and managing the Young SDG Innovators Program, which we're very proud of, and the SDG Pioneers Program with our great Executive Director, Kelly Kreiser, and many of our distinguished faculty. We also, so on the YSIP, you see it's a 10-month program Cohort 1 includes young SDG innovators from major companies, as you can see, from across sectors. And they're both in-person and now virtual camps, of course. And so it's very exciting to us. And we're going to wrap up the first cohort in June and look forward to advancing this with partner business schools and universities around the world. Just to go back to the ASU, Arizona State University level, Arizona State University, as many of you, has been ranked #1 for innovation for the last 6 years. And one of the primary areas where it has been really a leader in innovation has been in the area of sustainability. We set up the world's first school of sustainability. We have nearly 3,000 faculty that are in one way or another advancing sustainability research, teaching, or practice. We've just launched a new College of Global Futures, and Thunderbird is sort of the other side of the coin. The College of Global Futures is very much driven by our interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary science and social science academic research efforts, and the Thunderbird School of Global Management is very much on the other side of the action learning applied practice complement to that. And so we work hand in glove with our sister school, the School of Sustainability, and the College of Global Futures. Major foci on every one of the SDGs. And so we're really proud, again, to be one of the founding members of PRIME, one of the continuing champions of PRIME in everything we do, including with our regional centers around the world. We have 12 regional centers from Nairobi to Jakarta, from Geneva to Seoul. All of them advance our work in partnership with the Compact and to advance the SDGs. So with that, back over to you, Adam, and thank you so much for having me on this wonderful Globinar.
Thank you, Dean Khagram. And I'd ask that you turn off your webcam, thank you. And then Donna, perfect. Dean Rapaccioli, whose name I might be butchering.
You're saying beautifully, as if you were truly talented.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. I'll let you take it away.
My name is Donna Rapaccioli. I'm the Dean of the Gabelli School of Business. I'm an accounting professor, and I've been at Fordham for many, many years. And this is a very special year for Fordham, like the UN and like the Global Compact. We are celebrating a very important milestone. It is our centennial year, 100 years of purpose-driven business education. And we, we're been celebrating throughout the year, and we will continue. Many of those celebrations now are virtual, so please be on the lookout for them, because as many people as possible are welcome to join. We have been proud members of PRIME since 2009, and we've been involved as a champion school and hosted many different things at our campus. And it really is a joy to be here to talk a little bit about how we've been implementing the PRIME principles. So if you can turn to the next slide. I wanted to just share the mission of our school, because it's so well aligned with PRIME. And the mission of the Gabelli School is to inspire and empower positive global change, developing students into compassionate business leaders, and supporting faculty and students in the ongoing generation of new knowledge. And for us, there really is a responsibility about generating new knowledge that will impact business in a positive way. So if you reflect on that mission and then go to the next slide, which reinforces what Mette was saying about the principles, our mission really does align extraordinarily well with the PRIME principles around purpose, values, research, method, partnership, and dialogue. So I thought I'd use my time to just share some specific examples of some of the things that we're doing around these 6 principles. And I group them into groups of 2. So on the next slide, you'll see purpose and values are grouped together. And, for us, again, I mentioned the mission, but it's also part of our vision statement, which is to be recognized as the business school for socially responsible business. And I'm proud to say that we have received many accolades in this space. For example, many of you have heard of the Corporate Knights MBA for a Better World. We were ranked 11 there, and most recently at Davos, the positive impact ranking, we were in the top 30 schools. You know, again, for us, this is a journey. You know, we're making some good progress, but we really aspire to do much, much more. And that is embedded in our mission, our vision, and a value statement that the school has adopted, which really explicitly states that we expect business to be a force for good. Specifically around the curriculum, I thought I'd highlight a few things that we're doing. So we have both undergraduate and graduate students, and we want to make sure that all of them are aware of the SDG goals. And in both graduate students and undergraduate students are exposed early on to these principles. So for the undergrads, they take an introductory course, which is really defined around the SDG goals. And the students are asked to identify a challenge and then come up with some potential solutions that might advance society toward making that challenge a little less difficult for individuals. And then we also have what we call social innovation cohorts that the students can opt into, and that's been extraordinarily popular. We had originally thought we'd only have one cohort of 35, and now we are oversubscribed in our second cohort, where the students study, you know, the main business topics, but the companies that they focus on are those that have really made commitments to social innovation and to sustainability. And like Thunderbird, we also have a graduate degree in management, which is all about sustainable management. But even beyond the curriculum, we really emphasize a holistic approach, and there are a lot of co-curricular activities that the students are involved in. We have an entity called the Social Innovation Collaboratory, and the students engage in non-credit practicums around financial inclusion, sustainable fashion, sustainable design. And again, this rounds out what they're doing curricularly. So we really want to take a holistic approach to what happens in the classroom, but also reinforce with real-world projects. You can go to the next slide. You know, to just reinforce the importance of research and method, we've organized a whole cohort of social innovation fellowships where faculty are awarded stipends, and they're partnered with 3 or 4 students, graduate and undergraduate, to support them in that research. And we've created a cohort where these faculty meet quite often together and share their research. Again, we're really pushing the faculty to work on research with impact that will positively impact the business profession. We've also been hosting a lot of thought leadership conferences. Most recently, we had a Future of Work conference where we had many individuals, including some deans, the business professionals, the editor of Wired magazine, all trying to really discuss how can we engage in sustainable business and the future of work in a sustainable way. You know, also like Thunderbird, we have a number of research centers that are really dedicated to business as a force for good. For example, the Center for Humanistic Management is really looking at new approaches to management and well-being. Center for Positive Marketing is another example that's looking to how businesses raise positivity and the positive impact that they have on society. Last slide, please. And then partnerships and dialogue. We have a partnership with the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board. Again, my discipline is accounting, so this is incredibly special to me, but they do host all of their meetings on our campus, and our students are able to serve as research fellows for the SASB. And we have many faculty engaged in that type of research. And then we also have corporate partnerships, which really advance our ability to deliver on the prime principles. PVH, Phillips Van Heusen Corp, is you know, a really strong influence for positivity and sustainable business in the fashion space. And we've partnered with them to allow a lot of their executives to come to our campus to teach about supply chain and the circular economy. Similarly, EY has really been out in front with sustainable business practices, and they've been teaching some of our courses and involving our students in practicums that will advance best practices in sustainable business. And then the last thing I'll mention is something that's very new and I'm very proud of. We've recently launched what's called the Responsible Business Coalition. And this is really a convening of industry leaders and academia and not-for-profits to really talk about the challenges in their space. And we've started with fashion, and we convene the CEOs of the major fashion houses and retail, and they share what their challenges are and create action plans for how universities and others can help them advance their goals around sustainability. And next, we'll be doing similar things with the financial services space. So again, for us, Prime is really an integral part of who we are. It's embedded in everything we do. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dean Rapaccioli. If you could keep your webcam on, and I'll ask Dean Khagram and Mette Morsing to join us as well. Mette, are you there? And where am I? I should join as well. There I am. So I wanted to take the remaining time of this webinar to have a discussion specifically around two questions, and of course we'll integrate questions from the audience should we have time. But I know that our colleague Nikolai is quickly responding to questions that are coming in, so please keep them coming in. I'd like to ask everyone really how business and academia can collaborate to enable responsible leadership in times of global challenges. Obviously the SDGs, and climate change, but particularly COVID-19 right now. And so I want to start with Mette. How can academia and business collaborate? Obviously, the Global Compact is a business-led initiative, but Prime is an initiative of the Global Compact. So I was wondering your thoughts on that, and then we'll open to the deans.
Yes, no, thank you, Adam. Thank you so much. And thank you for these two. It was wonderful to listen to these two presentations and all the impressive things that's going on that I didn't even know of. That's really wonderful. And it's this kind of sort of systems integration, if I can put it that way, that is so very, very difficult to do. I mean, I remember myself, 15 years ago, the lonely, business ethics type professor who was fighting and being frowned upon or, at best ignored. And I can see how that has sort of changed. And now that, we see departments dedicated, we see centers dedicated to what we are talking about here today. But more importantly, and that's sort of the next step, that is to actually also have those colleagues in other departments, if I can put it that way, or in some departments that may be less convinced about the agenda that we are setting here with the Paris Agenda and with Agenda 2030, of course. So I think that is happening right now, and I may even go back to, again, the pandemic in the context we operate today may actually be a force in having those colleagues who may have been more skeptical to actually join forces and take a very strong interest as they have been shaken or maybe even shocked about what is going on. But I'll just mention a few examples where I think we could improve, even at least from the context where I come. I think something like, for example, sustainable finance is very, very high on my agenda. And I can see how the financial community is engaging. Asset managers, owners, the banks are really getting into how can the money flow towards creating stronger investments and stronger interest in sustainable development into the future. And of course, we need, as academics, we need to ask ourselves to what extent are we able to follow through, because we also need the data to do good research, and that research will then eventually merge into the way we teach and into our textbooks and so on. How can we speed up that process? And I think that particular area is at least one that is very high on my mind, to invite practice, to join forces with academia, to perhaps learn new ways of accelerating that process of having good research. And I think many of these digital collaborative platforms could be one way that we could explore. I mean, it's out there for us now. We're all jumping in, although we are a little sort of, overwhelmed now and then if we hit the right button or not. But I think that we are forced to do so right now. So I think there's a lot of potential to, for example, explore that one area, academia and practice.
Thank you, Mette. Maybe Dean Rapaccioli, if you could continue with your thoughts on how business and academia can collaborate to respond to these challenges.
Thank you. So I think it's important to create forums for students, faculty, and industry leaders to come together in a variety of settings. So, I think for me, it's very important who I put in front of the students and making sure that I put successful leaders whose views and values align with what the school aligns with. And then also having these practicing professionals reinforce what the faculty is teaching them, for example, about the circular economy, and having these business leaders attest to how it works and what they're investing in R&D. So, I think it's very important to have faculty, students, and these professionals interact in a variety of settings, whether that be, formal presentations or in class. And, one of our advantages, being located in New York is we do have access to great adjunct professors. So we're able to bring together some of these thought leaders with the faculty, quite often. And it does, as Mette says, spur interesting research, and it validates some of the topics. So, again, to me, it's bringing these stakeholders together in one spot, whether it's on Zoom or in a physical room, is really a big part of the contribution.
Dean Khagram, did you have some additional thoughts you wanted to add?
Yeah, I want to build on what Mette and Donna said, because I completely agree. It's really about building and advancing these multi-stakeholder partnerships that, Fordham and Donna have done so well, and Mette is doing through her career and will lead us now that she's the head of Prime. For us at Thunderbird, I'll just give you 3 or 4 examples. On the finance side, for example, as Mette was saying, we're working closely with MUFG Bank on advancing something that's close to, I know, Donna's mission and ours as well, which is compassionate leadership in the global finance sector. And how can we really do that? MUFG Bank has actually launched a training program to train all of their 240,000 employees in compassion. And so what we want to do is we're working with them and other finance companies to say this should be core practices of training for all finance professionals. And a big focus on that is compassion in the global finance sector to achieve the SDGs. So that's one example. A second example is at the city level. We're working with city governments in Los Angeles and Nairobi, but also the companies and private sectors in those cities and civil society to really harness the data revolution and new forms of fourth IR technologies to advance achievement of the SDGs. And so again, academic institutions, whether they be business schools or universities more broadly, can be neutral conveners, can provide the institutional backbone, the research, and so forth and so on. I think the final one is on climate, on the climate side. We launched a white paper at the World Economic Forum, very much on the area of carbon removal. We know that we have so much more to do on adaptation and mitigation, but the third pillar of climate is really removing carbon from the atmosphere. Even if we achieve 1.5, which we must, and adapt to the new climate reality with resilient infrastructure and so forth, we still are going to have 400 to 450 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. We have to remove that. And so what's exciting for us as a business school is that there are technological and natural solutions, such as negative carbon building materials, that are both good for the environment, good for climate, carbon removal, and our business opportunities. And that's where I think we can do really the best work, which is to find as many of these win-win possibilities as possible.
That's really illuminating. Before we move on to the second question, I wanted to ask one of the clarifying questions that just came through from the audience. I think it's really interesting to ask of the speakers we have here today. And it's really a simple question. How do you define responsible leadership? It's been mentioned with regard to developing responsible leadership in the business sector in partnership with academia, but what exactly does that even mean? And I imagine each of you might have somewhat different responses to that. I'll let whoever wants to speak first on that speak.
Mette, Donna, I'm happy to jump in, but welcome.
Go ahead.
Okay, so for us at Thunderbird, it's very straightforward. We actually have an oath of honor. I should have probably mentioned this. and I think Donna has a similar type of thing at her wonderful business school, where all of our students, faculty, staff, alumni, our 45,000 alumni around the world have basically embraced an oath of honor. And in the oath of honor, if you read it, which it's on the website, I won't go through the details, it basically defines responsible leadership. It's about leadership with a set of moral and ethical principles that are very aligned to the Global Compact principles. It was actually set up, sort of during the time early and well before the Compact, so it sort of was predecessor. And every student that is admitted to Thunderbird in their first week has to commit to that oath of honor, and then at graduation has to recommit to that oath of honor. So for us, it's that's both our symbol and practical manifestation, and in that it has the language of what we believe responsible leadership to be, Adam.
Thank you, Sanjeev. I don't know, Donna, if you wanted to provide the Fordham perspective on that.
It's very, very similar, and we have a phrase and that we repeat over and over again, and it's men and women for and with others. And we really try and instill the importance of our role in society. And, that happens again through the coursework, but also through the co-curricular, through a program which we have called community engaged learning, which really allows the students to understand, what's happening, outside of, in some instances, their own bubble. So, I think a big part of it is for everyone to understand and immerse themselves in different environments.
I think that really reinforces that we can't have responsible businesses without responsible leadership. And so that's where business schools play such a strategic role. Mette, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, sorry, Adam, for interrupting. No, I was just listening to these and the idea of having an oath, actually, like you have in medicine, also for your two schools, actually having that into the management school, into the business school. I think that is a very good idea. I also think that, when we discuss these oaths or these declarations or definitions of responsible leadership and what it is and what it is not, there's often this sort of critique from people who are maybe at a little more of a distance of these concepts to say, well, that's just a lot of words. That's just a lot of fluffy words. What does it really mean? I want a very sharp definition. And I think one has to remember that in this, in the definition of responsible leadership, one has to be sufficiently inclusive. Because if you're going to define very, very tightly what responsible leadership is, you sort of run the risk of ruining the whole thing, if I can put it that way, because you'll be very easily moralizing in a way that you are disciplining rather than empowering the people that you want to inspire with your responsible leadership. So I think we need to accept that language, and we need to keep on discussing what responsible leadership is. Because what it was 20 years ago is not what it is today. What it is in Copenhagen is not what it is in Mumbai. So we also need to think in a global way that we need to be able to contextualize and be respectful in terms of what it means in different places of the world as well.
That's really wonderful, and I want to thank the audience member that posed that question. Moving on to the next listed discussion question, I'm going to ask this with including some language pulling from some of the questions from the audience and expand the scope of it. So I'll ask the question, then I'll add the additional components from the audience questions. So the discussion question is, what can businesses learn from academia in terms of new trends, innovation, research, and approaches to sustainable development, and vice versa? And in terms of the questions from the audience, the two things I wanted to add to the scope of this question is we're talking a lot about sustainability in terms of environmental sustainability. I mentioned climate earlier, but of course it's much broader than that, and particularly in response to COVID, thinking about inequality and poverty and hunger. So sustainable development in that larger sense. And then additionally, particularly with the Compact, we so often have our conversations talk about the role of the largest companies in the world. But of course, the global economy is made up majority of small businesses. And so if you could touch on the role of small businesses in your response as well. Obviously, that's a big scope for a question, but whoever wants to take the first stab at it, please go ahead. Maybe we'll, Donna, you seem to be gearing up to respond, so maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. So, you know, I think one of the advantages of a university setting is the fact that we have such young, bright talent, and we have very well-trained academics who know how to really do comprehensive research. And, you know, by putting those together with industry, which in general, you know, often is ahead of where academic research might be, by coupling the student scholars with the faculty who are well trained in method to really look at some of the industry challenges, I really think industry can learn from this combination of the academic, the student, taking on their problems. And we have seen some examples where companies have given us some of their challenges, and what comes back is extraordinary. And they adapted, and you know, this happened with BMW when we were looking at mobility in New York and driverless electric cars. So again, you know, the depth of research skills coupled with the innovation that many young minds have really does add to industry. So that was one thing. And then, you know, I think having a lot of emphasis in our school on social entrepreneurship, which we do, really does help business as well, because these are the small scale, usually smaller scale companies that are trying to address some of these really big, challenging problems. So looking at social entrepreneurship as a lens to inform larger businesses, I think is also helpful.
Who would like to follow up?
Mette?
Sanjeev, Mette?
Yes, no, thank you. No, thank you. I think that is truly important, Donna, what you are emphasizing here. This kind of even co-construction, you could say, collaboration on these issues. Of course, I want to mention science-based targets. I mean, science has not been en vogue for many years in some parts of the world. Suddenly, we have, you know, science-based targets being appreciated, and being valued, being invited. So I think that's a very, very crucial way forward. I think also, you know, I've been in my own work with companies, testing the taken for granted assumptions. For example, the assumption that partnerships is always a good thing when you want to improve your business, or when you want to improve or have some more social impact. But partnerships are not the same. So some of the investigations I've seen recently on exploring what type of partnerships under what context do actually both benefit businesses and the social environment at the same time. It's not always obvious, and sometimes in some of the cases I've seen, businesses are actually going ahead with a wonderful partnership, they think, but it doesn't really deliver at the end. So that sort of testing the assumptions that we often think this is a good thing, so the more the better. It's not always the case. And of course, also sort of the research informing new regulatory frameworks, for example, on reporting. Maybe in your field, Donna, sort of the new reporting that we see emerging for small and medium-sized enterprises. Sometimes you get the impression that the type of regulation on ESGs that have been invited to multinationals are also sort of thought of, you know, we can just do exactly the same for the SMEs. They need to report in the same format on the same issues. It doesn't necessarily benefit the small, medium-sized enterprises. So here again, research can inform those regulators to sort of say, well, what is actually the challenge for SMEs when they are asked to report on their sustainability efforts. So these are just sort of three issues that come to my mind when I think about, you know, what businesses can benefit from working with academia. Thank you.
Right. Well, just quickly, Adam. Yeah, just quickly, I just reinforce one thing. You know, I agree with everything that Donna and Mette said. Just reinforce one particular thing Donna said about the students. We have global challenge labs, very similar to the kinds of group projects that Donna was talking about. They're oftentimes an SDG challenge, more or less, for a company or an organization that our students are working with. I completely agree. You know, the innovation, the creativity, these get adopted and really become transformative. A second really is about innovation. You know, what happens with innovation is that, you know, something happens, and innovation gets founded or set up or implemented. Our job as academics is to make sure that that innovation is well understood, can be adopted and adapted to very different, as Mette was rightfully saying, cultural contexts, institutional contexts, sizes of companies, and so forth. So we have a responsibility to find them, to make sure that they are accessible, but also that they don't just get sort of replicated without thinking about how is it actually that this innovation can scale and have the kind of impact it should. But the third is really, I want to go back to the area of win-win opportunities. I think it's our responsibility and opportunity as academics and academic institutions to really be able to look at it from a systemic perspective and see how can we advance new technologies, new business models, new approaches that can be both a win for companies as a win for the SDGs. And that's really what we want to make sure we're doing across the board in everything we do.
Dean Khagram, I want to thank you for that. That unfortunately is going to have to be the last word due to time. I want to just quickly acknowledge that we weren't able to get to all the questions that came in. We're ferociously trying to respond in writing to as many as possible. One question that I'm sadly weren't able to get to, which was on diversity and access for diverse voices in these conversations, but hopefully we could touch on that another time. With that, I'd like to just quickly note before thanking our speakers that the next webinar in this series will be in 2 weeks at the same time on managing business agility for the SDGs. We will have the CEO and president of the Project Management Institute, as well as the COO of the UN Global Compact and a to be identified corporate leader to join that conversation. It's going to be a really great conversation, particularly in light of COVID. And with that, I'd like to once again thank our illustrious speakers for joining this call and for all of the attendees for joining us for this conversation. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a safe and a pleasant rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.